Hi, I'm Leonore, and today I'm going to tell the story A Land Disputed Between Oceans.
Long before the Spanish arrived, the Panamanian Isthmus was inhabited by peoples such as the Cueva, Ngabe, Guna, and other groups who controlled complex trade routes between the Caribbean and the Pacific. Trails cut through the jungle, connecting distant territories, and the isthmus functioned as a strategic corridor between northern South America and Mesoamerica. Worked gold, refined ceramics, food, and knowledge circulated there. Indigenous Panama was already a bridge between worlds. The social organization of these peoples was far from improvised. There were regional chiefdoms, alliance networks, and clear territorial control. Gold was not merely material wealth, but a spiritual and political symbol. Communities adapted to the humid geography, developed agricultural techniques suited to the tropical climate, and maintained a delicate balance with forests and rivers. The isthmus was not a forgotten land. It was fully integrated into larger systems. When the Spanish arrived in the early 16th century, they saw something different in the isthmus than the local peoples did. For the crown, this narrow strip of land could shorten routes, accelerate the flow of wealth, and consolidate imperial power. First contact was marked by conflict, exploitation, and imposition. European diseases spread rapidly, devastating populations that had never faced such epidemics. With the consolidation of Spanish rule, Panama quickly became a logistical mihwar of the empire. Gold and silver extracted in Peru crossed the isthmus along forced routes, under armed supervision, reaching the Caribbean and then Europe. The founding of Panama Viejo in 1519 marked the beginning of a cycle of intense exploitation. Indigenous territories ceased to be an autonomous corridor and became a cog in a global system that drained wealth. The native population suffered devastating consequences. Epidemics wiped out entire communities, while survivors were subjected to the encomienda system, forced to work in support of the colonial economy. Indigenous social structures were fragmented. Leaders lost authority, territories were forcibly reorganized, and spiritual practices were persecuted. The isthmus no longer belonged to those who had known it for centuries. Over the following centuries, Panama remained strategic not because of its autonomy, but because of its geography. Corsairs and pirates attacked gold routes, forcing the crown to reinforce defenses. The original city was destroyed by Henry Morgan in 1671, leading to the founding of a new capital. The isthmus lived according to external interests. Its importance was global, but decisions were rarely local. Even under Spanish rule, resistant indigenous communities preserved territories in more remote regions, maintaining language and customs. The jungle became refuge and protection. While the coast was shaped by imperial interests, the interior safeguarded memories from before the conquest. Colonial Panama was not homogeneous. It was a territory divided between strategic exploitation and silent resistance. In the early 19th century, the winds of independence sweeping across Latin America reached the isthmus as well. In 1821, Panama declared independence from Spain. But freedom did not mean full autonomy. The region chose to voluntarily join the newly formed Republic of Gran Colombia, seeking political stability and protection. The isthmus remained too strategic to walk alone in a world shaped by greater powers. During its time as part of Colombia, Panama remained crucial as an interoceanic route. The California gold rush in the mid-19th century once again turned the isthmus into a vital passage between oceans. Thousands crossed its trails and later its railroad. The territory continued to serve the world. Geography was destiny, but political decisions were still influenced from outside. The idea of cutting through the isthmus to connect the oceans was not new. Since colonial times, explorers had imagined an artificial canal. In the late 19th century, France began construction under Ferdinand de Lesseps, the man behind the Suez Canal. The project was ambitious but underestimated Panama's tropical complexity. Diseases such as malaria and yellow fever devastated the workforce. The French attempt collapsed after thousands of deaths and massive financial losses. The dream of uniting the oceans survived, now as a project open to another power. As European investors withdrew, the United States watched closely. The isthmus was not just about engineering. It was about control of global trade, military influence, and strategic dominance over 20th century sea routes. In the early 20th century, the United States negotiated with Colombia for permission to build the canal. The Colombian Senate rejected the agreement, fearing the loss of sovereignty over the isthmus. For Washington, the project was too strategic to abandon. Panama once again became the center of external interests, greater than its own political voice. In 1903, with decisive support from the United States, Panama declared independence from Colombia. U.S. warships prevented any Colombian attempt to retake the territory. Days later, a treaty was signed granting the U.S. near total control over the future canal zone. The new nation was born, already constrained by agreements limiting its autonomy. Construction of the Panama Canal began under U.S. administration, combining modern engineering with strict sanitary controls to combat tropical diseases. Thousands of workers from the Caribbean and other regions took part in the monumental effort. The canal was not only a technical achievement, it was built through hard labor, deep wage inequalities, and racial hierarchies embedded in the project itself. When the canal opened in 1914, the world changed. The distance between oceans was dramatically reduced, reshaping global trade routes and military strategies. Panama became a central hub of international commerce, but the canal zone remained under foreign control. The territory that connected oceans was still internally divided between formal sovereignty and dominant external presence. For decades, the canal zone functioned as a nearly independent territory within Panama. Administered by the United States, it had its own laws, separate schools, and a standard of living distinct from the rest of the country. The division was visible and symbolic. For many Panamanians, the canal represented global progress, but also a constant reminder that a vital part of their land was not under national control. Tensions grew throughout the 20th century. Student protests and nationalist movements demanded full sovereignty over the canal. In 1964, violent clashes erupted following a dispute over the display of the Panamanian flag in the canal zone. The episode left a deep mark on collective memory. The isthmus that had long served the world began demanding control over its own strategic geography. After prolonged negotiations, the Torrijos-Carter treaties were signed in 1977, establishing the gradual transfer of canal control to Panama. The process represented more than an administrative change. It was a belated recognition that the territory needed to regain its political integrity. The canal would no longer be a foreign enclave, but an integral part of national sovereignty. On December 31, 1999, Panama assumed full control of the canal. For the first time since its construction, the main interoceanic route was officially under Panamanian administration. The territory that had been exploited, divided, and managed by external powers finally reunified its strategic geography. But the history of the isthmus was not only about the canal. It was about an identity shaped by centuries of global interests. Even after regaining control of the canal, Panama continued to occupy a central position in global trade. The expansion, inaugurated in 2016, allowed even larger ships to pass, reinforcing the isthmus's strategic role in the 21st century. The canal ceased to be merely a historical legacy and became a direct economic instrument of the country. The geography that once attracted empires now supported Panama's own international projection. But contemporary Panama is not only engineering and commerce. Indigenous communities such as the Guna, Ngabe Bugle, and Embera continue to fight for territorial recognition, cultural preservation, and autonomy. While skyscrapers rise in the capital, ancestral lands still face environmental challenges and economic pressure. The colonial past and strategic logic continue to shape present-day tensions. The isthmus also became a symbol of global financial circulation. Its strategic position extended beyond the physical canal, into banking systems and international corporate centers. The name Panama began appearing in debates about capital flows and economic transparency. Once again, the territory functioned as a bridge, not only between oceans, but between economies. Despite transformations, pre-colonial indigenous memory remains alive in symbols, languages, and traditions. Panamanian identity is the result of historical layers: native peoples, Spanish colonization, Colombian influence, and U.S. presence. The isthmus has never been merely a transit zone. It has always been a place of encounter, and often of imposition. Over 5 centuries, Panama was shaped by interests coming from outside. From colonial gold to 20th century diplomatic negotiations, its geographic position repeatedly determined its political fate. But each cycle also generated resistance, adaptation, and reinvention. The isthmus learned how to survive between greater forces. Today, ships cross the canal daily, without imagining the layers of history beneath their roots. Before modern engineering, there were indigenous trails. Before diplomatic treaties, there were invasions. Before global trade, there were communities that understood this land as home, not as a shortcut. Modern Panama carries this legacy, even when the world sees only its strategic utility.
Panama was ancestral land and became the world's passage. It was never small, it was contested. If you want to keep traveling through history with me, tell me in the comments which territory we should visit next.